Hello and welcome to the Unprofessionals podcast. I am joined by Nathan Page via the phone. We are both sitting in our cars in our respective workplace parking lots during our lunch breaks because we are dedicated to talking about zombie-based television shows. So Nathan, we are here today to talk about The Walking Dead finale, which happened last night. We're recording this on Monday. So if you don't want spoilers, don't listen. And also we're going to talk about Fear the Walking Dead, which debuts next week. So how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm glad we're doing this. And like you said, we are full-time workers. So if we're going to get the talk in, we gotta compromise. We got to find a way to do it. So I'm glad we're doing it.
Exactly. So just off the bat, The Walking Dead, the finale happened last night, and we will be talking about spoilers for the second time. So you are officially on the hook. If we spoil anything and you get mad, it's your own fault.
Are there really any spoilers? The way it ended,
well, someone gets clubbed in the head.
Spoiler alert that there are no spoilers?
No, okay, well, there you go. So I was going to ask you, just based off of the finale alone, not in relation to the rest of the season, just as a singular last episode, what did you think of it as?
As a standalone episode, here's what I liked about it. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I was waiting for something to happen, and the whole season has been building towards that moment that it ends with. And so what I liked about it was it did something that most TV shows and sporting events and whatever, just like things you want to watch on TV, you want urgency and you want anticipation. You want to feel like this is taking you somewhere. And so the whole thing, what it did right was it was taking me somewhere. And that, I felt anticipation. I felt urgency. I felt like something was happening. And I was in it. But I think the negative is that it didn't reward me for that at all. I didn't actually go anywhere in the end. I went somewhere, but not really. And so I didn't get out of the car almost. It took me there, but I'm not actually outside of the car there. So the positive is that I created anticipation and urgency and excitement, but I don't feel like I got enough. So I don't know, but I really liked it other than that.
Okay. Speaking to what you were talking about as far as the destination, I was thinking about this some today and was talking about it with some coworkers. And the thing that I didn't really think about is that speaking on the destination, the entire destination of this season was Negan. That's what it was building towards. That's what it was hinting at, was this bigger, battered dude who would make Rick tremble. And I mean, he obviously did make Rick tremble, but I think the emotional side of me, just because with the way television shows have constructed me to think, is that in the finale of a drama action TV show, someone has to die, and you have to know who that person is, and it has to pull at your emotional heartstrings. So at first, with the way it ended last night with Negan cracking someone on the skull, I was like, so we don't get to see who? And then I thought about it a little bit more, and it didn't really disappoint me as much because the destination was seeing Negan make Rick tremble in his shoes, and we got there.
That's true. I can go with that. And I like that too. I think that the thing I am really happy about is that Negan didn't disappoint. I think he was worth the anticipation, worth the build up. And I also, I don't know, I think the way that they got to him was cool. I don't think it was it was obviously, you knew it was all building towards Negan, and it was a little cheesy, but I thought it was really good. I thought it was really well done the way they got us there. I do think though at some point you kind of have to, I don't know, I guess it's almost in my mind the way 24 became towards the end was it was all about how do we leave people hanging? How do we leave people wanting more? And I would have wanted more because of how good Negan was. I think that means they could have shown us who they killed. Does that make sense? They could have given that away and not left us hanging, and I still would have been in for the next season.
I think that's different from the way most people think, though. And if someone dies, the Twitter moment for The Walking Dead, as everyone's talking about it, is, oh my gosh, Daryl died, or oh my gosh, Glenn died. It's not necessarily whoa, Negan's kind of a freak, and he made Rick like look like a, you know, like he was, you know, pee pee pants city or whatever Negan said, like that. And I think if you have someone die, like, yes, like maybe for us, we still, the thing we take from it is Negan, but for the general person, I think what writes the 200-word blog posts, you know, with the YouTube clip of who died, is more influential to the majority of people rather than this new character and making Rick tremble in his shoes.
Yeah, that's true. So with that said, do you think it was a success? Like, beyond it being enjoyable, because like I think it was enjoyable for us because in the end, Negan is a successful villain. He's the best villain they've had. He's better than the governor already. So like with that said, is it a success overall, just in general? Like as a, I don't want to say art, you know, because we've kind of talked about how The Walking Dead is what it is now. It is one of those shows like 24 or whatever that it's there and it's to be enjoyed. But, you know, in that way, like as art, as a piece of art, was it a success for that reason, or would it have been more of a success if they had done it differently?
I think it was a success purely for the Rick reason. Like, obviously Negan's cool. You know, the leather jacket, the baseball bat with the barbed wire, like, he's awesome. And like you said, he's the best villain they've ever had. The reason that it was a success for me, though, is that, you know, throughout the episode as they were blocking the different, you know, roads and all that stuff, I've never seen Rick flustered in a way that didn't result in him either freaking out in like anger and violence that resulted in, you know, his group's like a successful outcome. I've never seen him flustered and go the opposite way, to where it was just almost like this dead bird who runs into a clear window. Like he just hit Negan and fell. Like when you saw, as they were going through the woods when they got captured, like you saw his face and you saw his emotion. And I think that was what made it a success for me, because it was different. I think in the, you know, the many seasons we've had so far, I haven't seen that version of Rick, and I didn't know I wanted it until I saw it last night. And the moment I saw it, I was like, all right, this is successful, not only because it's different, but because it's taking him on a character arc that I wasn't really expecting him to go on.
I actually think that's really insightful for the show, I guess, just because I think that's true what you're saying completely. Because if you think about Rick, he's the most intriguing character, and he was, especially earlier, like season 3 and 4 and 5 was like his wheelhouse, because he was so complex, whereas everybody else kind of like, Glenn was like the good guy who had never killed anybody until this season, and like Daryl is kind of the BA country guy that everybody loves, and you know, it's like everybody has their role, but Rick was this like complex character who's battling through like, what do you become in this world, and like what do you have to be to survive, and you know, he's obviously the one with all the main love interests and all of like his son, his daughter, whatever. So it's just like interesting. I guess he was fading towards where Shane was, and you and I have talked about this, where Shane was in season 2? Is that this season 2? Where Shane was just becoming like, you know, you do what you do to survive, and that's it. And like Rick was almost too confident to be in this world the way he was and to be a relatable character. So I do think that this, like him being speechless, there was that moment. He literally, in any other circumstance, you know, they've gotten out of it, or he's bitten some dude in the neck, or he's come up with an idea, or he's talked his way out of it, or they shot their way out of it. In this situation, he's just there. He's speechless. He's trembling. They're completely at the mercy of Negan. And so it is cool to see. Cool is a weird way to say it, I guess, but it is interesting, I guess, and it pushes the story forward in a way that they haven't in like probably 3 seasons. It pushes it forward like tremendously, because now you have, like you've said, a new version of Rick. And so that is huge. That's really cool.
And I'm sure there have been moments in other seasons to where the story has hinged upon someone else, but I've never felt like the entirety of, you know, the main characters, speaking to, you know, Rick, Glenn, Daryl, Carl, Michonne, all them, I never felt like they were completely at the mercy of someone else, in terms of like the entire story now hinges upon what Negan does with them. And granted, there were moments where the governor was in control, and to where other plot points were in, like, you know, whether it was a massive zombie attack, but Rick and the others have always been able to react. And with the mass numbers that the Saviors have and all that, and with how Negan seems to run things, it's kind of like I've never, at least recently, felt like the entire story hinged upon someone other than Rick, Daryl, Michonne, or one of the other main characters. And now it feels like the entire thing. And they could do so much with this, because if the hinge point really is upon Negan and the Saviors, which I feel like it is, they could change the storyline for next season to be so much, to be really whatever they want. And granted, they have this massive open world and they could have done that so far, but they were kind of in this habitual pattern of going out to find stuff, zombie attacks. Oh, look, there's a box in this car. Let me go open it up even though there's a walker there. And then the walker jumps on him. It was kind of the same repetitive thing. And I think this season started trending towards the end towards being something different. And this finale was the perfect encapsulation of that, in my opinion, as far as it was. And I don't even know the best way to describe it. It felt different, and it was a good different, because The Walking Dead, for all that it is, and it's one of my favorite shows, like, it's fantastic, but it has been what it is, and it's not, it doesn't capture my attention in the ways that, like The People versus O.J. Simpson or Better Call Saul do, in like the weird, artistic, like drama-filled ways that especially Better Call Saul does, to where it's just this enjoyable experience. And the same thing with O.J. It's not necessarily an enjoyable story, but there are these two TV shows that just do something that The Walking Dead hasn't really done for me until later this season, and specifically the finale, to where it just feels like it could do anything. And I haven't felt like that really as much before, because I felt like they were in that same pattern.
That's definitely true. They were kind of stuck on repeat a little bit. And it was, honestly, this season had been harder to get through because of that. Because I know it seemed like they were trying to build something, but all of it felt like they were trying to get to Negan. And I don't know, I wasn't a huge fan of it until the finale. And like you're saying, now it's bringing it full circle to kind of a new story, a new world in a way. So with that said, like, what is this show to you now? Like, we've talked about it off of, like, not on a podcast before, but just, so what is this show to you? With that said, with the changing now, it feels like it's going a different direction, or just whatever, what is The Walking Dead for you?
It's still a must watch in terms of like a weekly thing, because for me, if I didn't watch it week by week, I would be, and it's probably the only show like this with a lot of people around, to where you were like, there have been multiple times where I've had to close my door at work because people were talking about it, and I was like, well, crap, I'm gonna, on Monday, and like, I'm gonna, miss, or I'm gonna be spoiled if I don't see it. So I would watch it on Sunday nights for that reason most of the time. But now, moving forward, I'm especially excited to watch it on Sunday night, because I'm actually excited to see what they do. Like, there have been multiple times, and my wife could testify to this, to where as someone was doing something, I could kind of like, predict what was going to happen to that person, because you can tell based off of the circumstance what The Walking Dead has learned to do with its characters. And if I was to guess what was going to happen last night, I would have been way off in terms of what I would have predicted for it. So now it's not only must-watch TV viewing on Sunday nights for the purpose of, actually being able to keep up with the conversation with, people who watch on a regular basis, but now it's a must-watch for me in terms of, I'm actually not really sure what they're going to do. And that's something that I felt like I haven't had with The Walking Dead in a long time.
I totally agree, though. It wasn't like a must-watch for some of this season, but I think the last 4 episodes, I knew that Negan was coming, and so I think I got back onto it being a must-watch. But it's still one of those things where, I guess, when you see shows like, I don't know what I'm thinking of, like, Fargo, or these other shows we talk about that are really good. Like you said, OJ versus the People. These shows that just create anticipation, that are so well done, that are just different, and that they don't just fall into the big franchise TV mode of doing things. And OJ is obviously not a perfect example, because it's a storyline retelling history, but something like Fargo or Mr. Robot or whatever, it kind of does its own thing, and that's refreshing. And I honestly think, that Negan is obviously from the comic books, but I think that the more that The Walking Dead strays from the comic books, the more interesting the show is. And that's what it seems like I've read in the past, where like the show isn't as, you know, related to the comic books. You know, season, I think whenever they were at the prison or whatever, that was where it was like completely off. But I thought it was like more enjoyable where they wouldn't go straight with the comic books, you know, just kind of do their own thing, be artistically creative. And but anyways, I'm getting off track here. To get to the point, is to me they remind me of the Cleveland Cavaliers. They seem dysfunctional. They've put together something that's amazing, that is a winner, but they seem dysfunctional sometimes. It seems like they don't really get it. But I really believe, like, in the end, when the Cavs get to the playoffs, just like they did last year, they were incredible, you know? And I just see that happening again this year. And I feel like that's kind of what The Walking Dead has done, is like, it seems like a show that's kind of settled into this big franchise. We're now the biggest thing on Sunday night, AMC's show, whatever it is. Like they've kind of settled in and they're good with it. And it seems that way, and it's gotten a lot of criticism for that, but now it's kind of changed the game to being completely unknown. And not just because of who are we going to kill at the end of the episode? Because that's kind of what it had become. But now it's become more of like, there's a storyline forming that is unpredictable. And that's exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And with that said, what are your hopes for what it will become next season? Not necessarily like, and I mean, maybe you could go into what you hope they do with the actual story, but do you hope that it goes back to like a zombie attack every episode? Because that's something that in the past we've talked a little bit about, is that they have the freedom to do whatever they want with zombies, and sometimes it feels like they just do the same thing over and over again. But what do you hope that it becomes, both artistically as, you know, like a cinematic experience, but also like what do you hope they do with the story in terms of the character development?
Okay, there's a couple things with the zombies. The show is about zombies and the fact that like we live in this world with zombies. And doesn't it seem more and more like zombies are just kind of there? I guess the more the show goes on, it's just like, and maybe it's because it's been there for so long and that's the way it should be. Like, it's just a normal part of their lives, so maybe it should be a normal part of the show. But it seemed like before there was more, I guess, like worry about the zombies and more fear about them. And maybe that's not right. Maybe that's recency bias or whatever. But it does say, I wish that they would find a creative way to use the zombies, and I'm not sure what that is, but it seems like it is kind of in a rut of like either the villain is going to use them as a like Red Rover chain link fence situation, or one's going to somehow silently sneak up on an unsuspecting victim. You know, it seems like they're out in the woods, and then somehow someone gets bit by a zombie and they didn't hear it until it's already biting that person. Like, I just wish they would be more, I almost hate to say this, but be more realistic with the zombies. But that's just like shop talk, you know. From a story perspective, I would like to see more complexity with Rick. Like, how is he going to respond to like literally having no power? Because he was super arrogant. I mean, he was literally saying in the RV, like, yeah, we'll end this, you know, like he said that before they left, he was talking about, you know, well, if things get crazy, like we'll end it. And it's just interesting to see a character go from completely confident to completely, you know, lacking power. So I'm interested to see how they do that with Rick. He's really the most interesting character to me. I mean, it depends on who they killed off, obviously, what else they do with the story, but Rick is the main concern for me. What about you?
I'm right there with you. I was going to say, like, Rick's the most interesting character on the show, bar none. And for a while, there was some competition with, at least in my opinion, with Michonne, Daryl, or Glenn perhaps being interesting. But now, the only character that I really like care about and am fascinated with is Rick. And that's just because we've talked about his character arc going from, you know, season 1 to where he is now, and how he kind of turned into like a version of Shane, you know, last year, especially this season, where, you know, he had almost become what he hated and he was embracing it. And it was interesting. Like, Crazy Rick was like something I looked forward to, like, you know, whether it's biting a guy's neck off or, you know, just tackling, like, you know, dressing up as zombies by, you know, scraping all their guts on him and walking through them. Like, he was just like this somehow superhero character in this zombie world. And to one of the most interesting things you can do with someone with absolute power and someone who's, you know, like a superhero is render them powerless. And that's what we have with him right now. So he's in an incredibly interesting situation. And that's why, as I thought about it more, the most interesting part of last night wasn't who got killed. It was, you know, I'll say this again, it was Rick being rendered powerless. And I'm excited to see not necessarily who died, because I could really care less unless it's Rick. But I'm just excited to see where they go with him. And I think it's interesting, the secondary storyline of the finale was Carol and Morgan. And I think Carol's someone who I was really interested in. And then they actually did the whole like depressed whatever is going on with her thing, which earlier in the season I probably would have said like, yeah, that'd be really interesting. And as it's played out, I've lost interest in it. Like I don't really care what's, you know, and I feel bad for saying that. I don't really care what's going on with Carol and, you know, her whole, whatever is happening with her after they were locked in the prison or whatever, a few episodes ago. But she's, I guess, becoming soft, I guess, if that's the right term, even though I don't know how I would react in those situations. But before she was this, like, she was kind of like Rick. She was like Rick's weird, like, nice grandmother little henchwoman who would make cookies for people, but would then, like, weirdly intimidate little kids. And, like, she had this edge to her that was just really interesting. And so I think that's the difference between Carol and Rick, because, you know, a season and a half ago, they were both probably equally interesting to me, and they were both in, you know, seemingly had power with every situation they were in, and they were both incredibly intimidating. And then now both of them have crashed, and I don't really care about Carol, but I'm incredibly intrigued with Rick. So I'm not really sure why that happened with the two of them, because they kind of had the same character arc in terms of they were both kind of weak in the beginning, then they got really strong and powerful like a season ago, and they were intimidating and they were scary, and now they've both crashed. And I don't really care if Carol disappears, but I'm more intrigued with Rick than I ever have been before.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the Carol thing has been kind of frustrating. And I think we've talked about the Morgan storyline. What they're doing with him isn't super interesting. It's just like they keep going back to this question of like, what's moral and what's ethical, and like, we shouldn't kill anybody. And like, and now she's kind of asking that question to herself, which I guess, like, it's not a bad idea. I just am not a fan of the way they're spending time on it. Like, she was such a good character the way she was, because she had this, like, almost dual personality. She was like a paradox of this sweet old lady that everybody loved, but nobody knew would kill anybody there, you know, as quickly as she would make them a cookie. Like, it's just like, I don't know, I kind of missed what they had created with her. And now it's like the way they're doing this thing, which I understand it. And I think it's kind of like the worst thing. Like, I think it's a good idea to make her character more complex. To me, it shows they want to keep her around longer, unless they kill her off after being shot. Like, I don't know if she's going to die, but it just seems like if you're going to do it that way, I don't know. Why do it that way? Why now? Why not wait a little bit? So it just, I don't know. It was kind of strange. I'm not a huge fan of that either. One thing I do hope for with Negan, because I was thinking about when you compare him with the governor was like really not likable at all. Like, and to me, all of the best villains are people that you almost love to hate, but you love them in a way. Like, you like them, like you need them to be in the show. With the governor, I just could not wait until they killed him. And my thing is, I hope that Negan becomes one of those characters that, like, you are happy to see, even though he's a villain. Does that make sense?
No, that definitely makes sense. And I think right off the bat, I had that feeling with him. And even though he was, I guess, way more evil than the governor, just in the way he presented himself and the way that his subordinates act out for him, but he was, like you said, he's just, something about him is just really likable, and I think that's the way they want him to be, even though, I mean, the dude carries around a freaking bat with barbed wire around it. Like, it's the most, like, evil and, like, satanic thing that they've probably had on this show, is this dude just cracks. It's like the guy on Inglourious Bastards who would, carry around the baseball bat and whack people in the head, and it was like, kind of portrayed in this light comic way, so it wasn't as harmful and like kind of gripping in terms of the viewer. But when Negan cracked whoever he cracked on the skull last night, and part of it had to do with like the the POV camera angle, but it was like it weirdly just like felt like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was much more emotionally withdrawing in terms of how they did it. And they've done tons of weird, violent stuff on this show, like beating people senseless, hanging people, biting. Literally, Rick like bit that dude in the neck and killed him. But for some reason, with the way that they played it out last night, it was just like probably one of the most violent moments that affected me the most. And yet, I'm still kind of like, yeah, like I could use some more Negan. Like I don't really want them to kill him off, obviously, because he's interesting, but I actually enjoy watching him. And I hope they don't whittle his character to simply long monologues about dominance and about evil and about how he controls everything, because like I get it, last night that was his big introduction and it was cool. I just hope that doesn't become like his trademark thing as he walks in and steps back and forth and he gives long monologues or whatever, and that can be part of his character, but he's just so likable that I feel like they can do a lot of different stuff with him. And as long as his personality doesn't change, I mean, he can, hit people in the head with a baseball bat all day. And for some reason, I feel like I'm still going to like him.
Yeah, I agree. And I think again, to like the comparison with the governor, they tried to make the governor like, they tried to give him more of a story than just like monologues and stuff, but it just never worked. Like I just wanted the guy to die. Like I was waiting for that to happen. But with this guy, it feels like he's introducing a new world, like a whole new world of possibilities for the show. And it's just like, I want to go where he's leading us. Whereas with the governor, like the second he was on the show, I was like, okay, well, this guy is going to die at some point, and I'm kind of ready to see how Rick kills him. And so that's just kind of the difference between the two. And that's what is so exciting about this finale. And so I guess with that, like, so I was totally blanked on my question.
Well, I'll go ahead and say that one of the things that I was expecting him to say last night was, and I don't know why this word kept popping into my head, but the word empire kept popping into my head. And I felt like it was the first time that, like, you think of like this new world or whatever, and that's something that they've talked about a lot, and rightfully so, because it's a new world. There's not necessarily like a governing power. And so if you look at the history of man, like every time there's like been a new like continent discovered, or like the world's been wiped out or whatever, what always ends up happening is that there's a man leading a group of people and they build an empire. Like that's something that has always happened from the beginning of time. So I think the thing that I'm looking forward to with this show is, how does the world's order come into play with all this? Because they haven't really ventured, many miles outside of wherever Rick and the gang are. And I think that's something, Fear the Walking Dead's going into, and we'll talk a little bit about that after this, but they're going into the before. I want to see how do empires form in this new world, because, and I don't know, maybe that's just like the video game part of me, like the RPG player who wants to see like, how's the new world order going to be established and like all that stuff. Like, for some reason that stuff is fascinating to me, and I think Negan could spearhead that. Like I was waiting for him to say something about how he's building an empire last night. Like that was like the big theatrical presence that he had on the screen, to where I felt like he was worthy of this massive like, push forward for like, holy crap, like these people have an empire. And I don't think it's that big, and maybe they won't even go towards that, but that's just something that I was thinking about. And it's a new world, so who's going to be the person who builds up the empire?
Yeah, that's definitely a direction they can go with the show. I mean, and that could be really interesting. It would definitely eliminate the whole like, okay, we've got a camp, now let's go to the nearest store and get supplies, and like you said, run into a zombie, and then like there's a situation where I really shouldn't go in there, but I gotta do it, and then you almost die, or somebody does get bitten and you have to cut their arm off or whatever. It's just like, I hate to say all that stuff with like so nonchalantly, but like it is what it is. It's just how the show's become. And so it definitely, that's one direction the show could go that would be extremely interesting. I do hope they don't just like, I hope they don't limit the show to just these two groups of people. And I've never read the comics. I don't think you have either, but I don't know what else is out there, and it would be interesting to kind of explore that space. So that'd be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So the question is, who was at the other end of that bat?
I've already looked up like conspiracy theories about all that, and I'm not going to go back and like the episode before that, I did play it in slow motion because I wanted to see if he actually had shot Daryl, and you can see in the slow motion like his gun went off or whatever. I wasn't about to do that and try to figure out eeny, meeny, miny, mo based off of like where the characters were located. I don't care that much, but I think I vaguely remembered, and someone mentioned this to me today, that he said something about like after he hit the person, Negan said like, "Oh, Daddy's taking it well." Well, he didn't know that Maggie was pregnant, so it probably wasn't Glenn. It could have been Carl, but I don't know if he hits a kid. So my other thought process was that, well, I guess Rick's the leader, so he could just be talking to Rick, and it could be anyone. So I don't really. If it was the comics, like he kills Glenn with his bat. That's what happens in the comics. But like we've talked about, they venture from the comics all the time. So I guess my best guess would be Daryl, since they've already shot him. Like, why not finish him off? So if I had to guess, it would be Daryl. What about you?
That's my guess too. I think that as much as I love Daryl, and there was a time, I think last season, I was like, Daryl's my favorite character. But I think after they killed Beth, it's been really hard for them to establish like a new story for him, a new foothold for him in the story. Like, he's just kind of there. I know he's still like the BA country guy, but now like, what does he have left from a story standpoint? Cause he's barely talked this season. His biggest like thing has been getting back his crossbow, and like he's been betrayed by Dwight. So like, there's not a whole lot going on for Daryl. So I would imagine it's him, just because it makes most sense. But yeah, if they're going with the comics, then obviously it's Glenn. But I think it's one of those two. I don't think that they would have gone outside of that. I guess the third person, who's the guy with the mullet? What's his name?
Oh, Eugene.
Could it be Eugene?
I think he was off to the side. Again, I'm not trying to like play too much into their distance from each other, but I think he was off to the side and he wasn't included in the eeny, meeny, miny, mo or whatever. So do you have any last thoughts before we talk about Fear the Walking Dead on this season, just kind of wrapping up The Walking Dead for a few months?
Oh, I was just going to say, I hope it's Daryl. That's the only thing I was going to say. Which, like, that sucks because he used to be one of my favorite characters, but I hope it's him, just because if they don't come up with a new storyline for him, he's not going to be enjoyable. But other than that, like we've said, I think that this could be a game changer for The Walking Dead. It's a show that we tune into. It's enjoyable. For me, it hasn't been must watch until the last few weeks. Like, this is the first live episode I think I watched, and I even started it on DVR. First one I've watched this season. So it's exciting to think that it could be going in a direction more like Fear the Walking Dead. So
yeah, I'm with you. I think, like you said, Daryl, he was probably one of my favorite characters, and then the Beth thing happened, and like you said, it's been hard to find a foothold. So if I had to choose a person to eliminate, it would be Daryl, which kind of stings because I thought he had a lot of potential. But so yeah, like you said, great season.
And I was going to say one last thing is that the one thing you have to have in a show, it seems like, is like either a journey or a villain. And now it seems like there hasn't been a journey for a long time. Like, they've been trying to rebuild Alexandria or whatever, or build up Alexandria. And that's just like, it is what it is. You kind of knew it was going to fall apart. But now there's a villain, and it seems like off of that they can establish new journeys, and that's exciting. So sorry to cut you off there.
No, I'm with you. So Fear the Walking Dead, I believe it starts up next week. We both enjoyed the first season. It was a little taste. I believe this is like a full season, so we're going to really get into it. Last we saw them, they were at the beach house, and they were kind of, sneaking like a little hint that they were going to be on a boat and that it was going to be based on a boat, kind of like a beach version of Zombieland, I guess. And the all the trailers have led us to believe that it will be based on a boat, and so we could talk about that like it's like a pirate version of Zombieland, but I don't think that's necessarily what we want from this show, because if we wanted that, we would simply just ask for like, okay, do like an NCIS version of Walking Dead, do one like on the beach, do one in the jungle, do one in the city, but we don't really want that. What we wanted from this show was it to be a different, like for it to be different stylistically from The Walking Dead, and we also wanted a little bit of a backstory. We wanted to find out what happened, how all this came to fruition, and the only thing I was disappointed with from the first season was that I felt like they got into the apocalypse too fast. I wanted to know more before everyone was on the run, because now basically, and they could prove me wrong with how they treat the second season, but it seems like it's just starting from the point of, okay, we spent like, 6 or 7 episodes talking about the before. Now it's just, all right, chaos has hit. And they hinted a little bit on like the government aspect of this in the first season. That's the stuff that's fascinating to me, is like, how is the government reacting to all this stuff, and like, what are they doing? And I didn't feel like they went into as much of the CDC/government stuff as they could have in the first season. And maybe I'm wrong and they'll go into it more in the second season, but it feels like they've opened up the floodgates of the zombies, and once you do that, I don't really know how you rein it back in.
Yeah, I agree completely with what you said. I mean, the most disappointing thing about the first season, I hate to start there, like that sounds really bad, but was that we went from one episode like, okay, it's happening. Like there are zombies in our houses. Like this is happening, to the next episode, like government quarantine. And that was it. Like I wish that they had just spent the entire season setting up, like, this is how the apocalypse happened. And then you kind of finish it off with the government quarantining, or trying to quarantine, Los Angeles, where it's based. I think that would have been such an interesting way to do it. Obviously, I'm always trying to tweak everything, whatever. But I was kind of disappointed about that, like you were. And I think they've pigeonholed themselves with that. And within the first season of The Walking Dead, the original show, they go ahead and say at the CDC in the first season, there's no cure. When you die, this happens. Like to say that, you instantly destroy like any storyline you could have, any journey you could have where they're trying to find a cure. And it kills it in this season too, because what are you going to do? Spend an entire season having this family go look for a cure when the entire audience already knows there isn't one? Like, that's not appealing at all. So to me, I just think they couldn't hold themselves in that way. But I wish they had kind of kept it, like you said. What happened in the apocalypse? What is the government doing with this? Like, what are powerful people doing with this? Because we've seen what powerless people have done with this. But anyways, with that said, yeah, I don't want this just to turn into like, hey, we're doing Walking Dead on a boat for a few episodes, and then we'll do it, in this location. It's like, let's create a new storyline, a new approach to this. Like, are they going to be more militarized? Like, or is this going to be about how the government became corrupt with all of this happening, or what is it? Is this how the world became anarchy? So I'm interested to see what they do there, and I just hope that they don't settle into the groove of the other Walking Dead,
I'm right there with you, and I get what you're saying about the pigeonhole with the cure thing. For whatever reason, that's probably one of the least interesting aspects of the apocalypse. I don't really care if it gets resolved, but I like the characters that they've developed so far. Like, I like how the actors are playing them. I'm liking the different styles and everything. I have no problem with that. But what I wish they could have done was maybe maybe the mom works in a government facility, and all of a sudden, okay, now we get an inside scoop occasionally as to what, people in the government are doing. I'm not saying she has to be a president, but like, what if she was like the Secretary of State or something like that? Could you imagine like what people would like think of powerful people during something like this happening? And like you said, we already know what happens to the lower class citizens. They basically just, they get put in a quarantine, and then when the government pulls out, they just leave. So, and now that and so that's my thought on the government thing. I mean, it's kind of a cheap, like, shallow storyline, but that would genuinely be interesting to me. And the other thing is that the whole location thing, I am disappointed that it looks like, and again, I could be proven wrong by how the story actually plays out. I loved the setting of the suburbs / downtown of Los Angeles for this. Like, I loved the diversity of it. I loved how they were playing the different environments. I loved they could both go urban and they could go beach feels. And I loved how they were doing that. And so I am a little disappointed that it does look like we're getting, Fear the Walking Dead Pirates version. And again, I could be wrong, but from everything that it looks like this city is kind of being eliminated as a backdrop to this. And that's something that's a little bit disappointing to me.
Oh, totally agree. Like, they could have done a lot. Like, when you watch World War Z, which was a good movie, like they used the urban setting so well, and it was so interesting. And it was like they used it in a creepy way, and they used it in an exciting way. And it's just like, it's so jam packed in a city like LA that's like, it's so spread out, but everything is close together at the same time. It just seems like a perfect place for them to play out a couple of seasons. Like let a couple of seasons happen there. And then, like you said, the suburbs are another interesting place. But back to the government thing, like, I think you're right. Like, we've seen a lower level government worker, a police officer, and how he responds to this. And now we've got, weren't they both teachers, or she was like a vice principal and he was a teacher?
Yes, I believe so.
Something like that. Yeah. So to me, it's like we're seeing the same kind of people, and respond to this situation in a way. And so it's like, it would have been so fun to have, like, even if she was like a secretary to someone who's really powerful, and then you give that guy, like, because in 24, there was always like one guy that was new to the show that was like a very important character, but you knew the guy wasn't going to last. So, like, why not have like a really powerful character whose story you follow, and just to like get a different perspective to see, this is how, a senator, or this is how Congress, or this is how whatever, this is how this person responded. Or heck, even someone like, this is how Mark Cuban responded to the zombies. Like, just having something where it's a little more different than, here's a middle-class government worker and their family. So, yeah, I'm with you completely with my disappointments with the show, because I think we both had high hopes. But that said, like, I mean, what can they do with what you've seen? What do you expect to be next?
I think the character that I enjoy the most is Kim, and that's something I was going to say is, like, what would you do if, like, Kim was like a senator from, Washington or from Florida or something like that? Like, that's the type of government that would be the most interesting to me, is like a mid-level government agent who has an inside ear to the White House, but also is, lives in a normal house. So enough of the government thing. But what I hope they do with this season is I hope they stray from the Walking Dead model enough, but they don't just completely forget that it's a spinoff of The Walking Dead. Like, we still want the zombie aspect of it. We don't want them to just become a sidebar to the character development. Like, the main thing of the show is that, they're fearing The Walking Dead. Like, they're learning to fear zombies. And so I don't want them to forget the roots of that. I also don't want them just to rush into just survival mode. I still want them to be inquiring about what's happening around them and what's happening with the entire situation, and ask big questions and try to find out big answers. And I guess one of those big questions is there a cure? And whatever, we already know what the answer is, but maybe if they just forget that, then it's not as realistic. I don't really know how they balance realism versus, storyline, but my wants for this season are pretty simple. Like, be different from The Walking Dead, but be the same. And I know that's kind of like, you have to balance those things, and I hope they do a good job of that. And I felt like they did a pretty good job in the first season. So I'm confident, and I'm expecting an entertaining second season of Fear the Walking Dead.
Yeah, same here. I'm cautiously optimistic, I'll say. I'm nervous, but I'll watch it. I'm going to watch every episode, regardless of how it goes. So I hope that they can keep up what they've created, because the characters are, like, I enjoy the characters. That was never a problem. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. I'm with you for what I hope is just that they create a new world, I guess, for this all to play out in. Like, don't end up back in the Southeast. Do
you have any final thoughts on The Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead?
No, I think that's it.
All right, very cool.
I will say one thing. sorry, I'm all over the place here. Sorry, I will say one thing. Last night I was watching. I just wrote about this and posted it, but I was watching the Knicks choke away another game, and I that's why I was late to watching The Walking Dead, is because I was finishing up that debacle before I turned into the movie or to the show.
So you watched one apocalypse before another. Hey-o.
Well done, sir. Well done. Are you excited about the Pistons being in the playoffs?
I'd be more excited if they were for sure getting the 8th seed, but I'm not so sure about that anymore because I think they're inferior to both the Cavs and the Raptors, obviously, but I felt like the Cavs series would be interesting because of the rivalry, but also because there's like a 20% chance the Cavs dysfunction isn't something that just goes away in the playoffs like it has in the years past, and I would take a 20% chance of that versus the Raptors choking something away.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yep.
I'm pulling for him, man. I'm vicariously pulling for the Pistons this year. So
thank you. I can always use a bandwagon Pistons fan for the playoffs because it'll probably be a 4-game sweep. But with all that said, be sure to check us out at unprofession.com. We have podcasts and some posts, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Subscribe on iTunes, and we will talk to you later. Nathan, thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh.